Plants Lesson 7.1 Introduction to Plants. And this is the first lesson of our last unit in grade 11 biology. So, what are plants? Plants are multicellular organisms that undergo photosynthesis, which we'll learn a lot more about in the coming lessons. There are also eukaryotes that are part of kingdom Plantae, just like we learned in the first unit. So in our case, there are two major roles plants have in ecosystems. One is photosynthesis, which is converting solar energy to a usable form of energy that is passed on to other organisms, or energy trappers. And then two, they provide habitats for other organisms. So the greater diversity of plants equals more types of habitats. And then the more types of habitats, the more types of animals, and so on. Using plants in daily life. So not only do plants, you walk outside and you see trees and grass and flowers and stuff like that, but plants also are used in our daily life. So all the way from things to what we eat to things that we use to build our house with. So why don't you pause the video here and start to make a list of things that you think that you can use for, that plants are used for in our daily lives. And I think you'd be surprised about what simple things we actually use plants for. Okay, so here's the list that I came up with, and this is not even half of them. So obviously food, basic foods like berries and stuff like that, but also things like salads and leaves. And then the most important crops in the world, like cereals, corn, rice, wheat, and legumes, and they're members of the pea and bean family. And then half of protein consumed by people worldwide actually comes from cereal grains, believe it or not. Plants are also a source of some pharmaceuticals. They're a source of fuel, so like biofuels. They're a source of building and industrial materials, so like I said, wood, pulp, paper, and oils, and ecosystem services, so like nutrient cycling and food source. So now we're going to talk about plant succession and where sort of plants come from after they've sort of been destroyed or taken up by things like natural disasters. And this is something that we talk about in sort of the intro to plants because it is a little bit interesting to understand about the sort of new habitats and new sort of communities that plants can form almost really quickly after natural disasters occur. So plant successions, natural disasters that often take out and affect plant communities include things like fire, flood, drought, frost, hurricane, tornado, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions. Basically anything that's nature related that can take out a plant community. We also have things called human disturbances that can take out and affect plant communities. And these are things like mining, deforestation, climate change, urbanization. So like knocking things down and building buildings there, stuff like that. And that's like more, we have to, as humans, do that. It's not sort of a cause of Mother Nature. So one thing we have to remember is that those are called disturbances. It's not quite succession yet because those disturbances are the actual thing that happens. So like obviously the plant is going to be disturbed if there is a flood or a fire. The plant's going to be disturbed by deforestation. And then the disturbance actually leads to the actual succession, which we'll talk about in a minute. But disturbances can actually be beneficial because it allows for new habitats to form. High temperatures can allow for some seeds to even germinate. So we're going to talk about germination too, but it essentially is how a seed can grow without any of the things that we really need for plants. It all really needs is just high temperature and water. And then severity depends on the extent and intensity, of course, of the destruction, which leads us to the statement that disturbances lead to succession. So ecological succession is the process where a community of plants in an area gradually changes over time. So after the disturbance, this sort of process of the whole community regrowing itself is called succession. Animal community then changes with it. This change is not always predictable, could be different, and succession promotes biodiversity, something we have been focusing a lot on in this whole entire class, biodiversity. So first off is primary succession, which is the process of changing from bare rock to an area with the dominant form of vegetation, and it only occurs in areas where no previous community existed. So sometimes for this, I like to make a little chart of primary succession versus secondary succession, so you could take some notes on that. Then we have secondary succession, which is when an existing natural community is disturbed by a natural or human-made disaster, so like after a forest fire. New forests can form in much shorter time due to the presence of soil, but it can also occur in vacant lots or farmland that is abandoned. Now you might see that word there, pioneer species, and pioneer species are the first organisms to grow in the barren landscape. Soil then develops as organic matter accumulates from the decomposed remains of the pioneer species. Mosses then replace lichen, or the pioneer species, and form more soils, creating vascular plants, and then the animal community again changes with the plants. So conclusion, plants go through many life cycles to provide us as humans with all of our necessities. Some disturbances can be good and some can be bad, and we have to remember as we learn through this unit that plants are very, very complex. And that's it.